So to get started here, I'm going to make a tower of boxes real quickly using the method that we used in the chain and wrecking ball video. So if we press Shift D, that will of course add an array modifier onto our object. And down here, these X, Y, and Z values, you can control the offset, that is the placement of each duplicate that the array modifier will generate. And of course, count is the number of times that the object with the modifier on it is being duplicated. So we can increase that like that. Or after pressing Shift D to add an array modifier to an object like we did, if we press it again on the same object, it will just increase that count for us. So what we want to do is set this X offset back to 1 and reduce this count back to the default of 2. And what we're going to do is add 2 more array modifiers, one on the Y offset and then finally the third one on the Z offset. And this will duplicate our object in all directions, allowing us to just press Shift D to expand this in a really quick way. So what I'll do is close that up and under Add Modifier, add another array. And I'm going to switch the X offset, which is default, to 1, which is why it just increased the length of this in the same direction. Press 0 to return it to 0. Switch the Y value, click on it, and just enter 1 on the keyboard. Close that up, and then add a third array modifier. Switch its X offset to 0 and then the Z offset to 1. So now I've got this huge monster set of arrays going in all directions, which I can of course just press Shift D to simultaneously increase the count of all these array modifiers, which gives me a huge stack of blocks here. It sort of looks like a one single block because they're so closely wedged together, but this is actually that one single cube just being repeated in all these directions and all these times. To show you what I mean, if I were to press Tab to go into edit mode, here's the actual original cube. If I were to say, press E to extrude this face out, press S to scale, you can see now how this is one object just being repeated a bunch of times. Or if I were to select this top face here, and if we press Z, we can see that the face is actually selected there with all that stuff still on it. Press Z to go back into solid viewport shading. I could press E to extrude that, S to scale that. In fact, I think it would kind of be cool if I did that for all the sides. So what I'm going to do, so I can make it all nice and even, is press Ctrl Z to undo those actions. And then I'm going to click the eyeball icon on each of these array modifiers, which hides their effect. And so that will allow me to just see my object by itself. Then I'm going to press A to select all the faces. And then rather than pressing E to extrude, I'm going to press Ctrl E, which does this type of extrusion that extends out from every individual face, which is useful for stuff like this. So we could do it about like that. And now I'm just going to press S to scale these down a bit. And so I've got some kind of modular looking weird thing here. So if we press Tab to go back into object mode, turn on the visibility back of all these array modifiers, we see this kind of weird stack of cube things here. I think I'll go ahead and increase the amount of times that these things are duplicated a couple more times. So I'll press Shift D, which increases the count of every single one of these array modifiers, which is why it grows so big. And I think that'll be good. So what's that? That's about 5 by 5 here. Cool. So let's go ahead and press Shift A, and under Mesh, add a plane, press S to scale. This is going to be our ground here. We want to make it good and big so that these cubes don't bounce away when they fall. Press G to grab, middle mouse to constrain, and just I want to bring that up above the grid. Press G to grab, bring this up above the grid, maybe scale the whole thing down just a little bit. And I'm going to press 5 to go into top view, press Z to go into wireframe, because I kind of want to position this over the center of the stage here. Okay, so now if I wanted to add physics to all of this, all I would do is press T to bring up my tool shelf, and under physics control, press add active to the selected Borg cube thing here, and then click on the ground and press add passive. Now if we were to press play, we'll see the cube fall and just kind of stumble around there. But we want these to be individual cubes, so what we want to do is select it and just press separate up here. And so now if I go ahead and double click to deselect all that, because I don't want to watch the thing play out with them selected, and press play, we'll see it go real slow because it's got a bunch of stuff to figure out right now. Blender and the computer does. We can of course pick objects up live while this simulation is running. Just select an object, pick it up and drop it, and play with stuff like this, which is pretty cool. But be aware that when you do that, if you pause and go back, that the objects that you move during the simulation will be moved at the beginning of the simulation as well. So I'll press Control Z to undo those movements I did. Let's see if I got them all. Yeah, okay. So down here in my camera view, I'm going to zoom out a little bit so I can see everything a little better. And I'm going to go ahead and pick one of these cubes for the camera to track, because sometimes it's nice to just have a little extra view going on, which can spark your imagination or give you insight into something you weren't paying attention to. So I'll press Track Selected there. And now if we press play, which these are just convenience animation controls here, we've got just kind of another perspective of everything going on. So press pause and go back here. And I'm also going to turn on high def shading. So for some of these buttons here, we can change things en masse. So for instance, if I were to shift select this row of cubes up here, and I wanted these to, rather than be using active rigid body physics, I could press add passive. And so if we press play, they will now be stuck in space the same way that the ground is. Or if I wanted to, say, change them back to active or change their shape to sphere rather than cube or convex hull or whatever it was on, we'll see these roll around on the ground quite differently from the other objects because they now have spherical collision detection on, so you can see them rolling away there. But for many of the sliders and options and things you can set up for the physics over here in the physics tab, you can't change all the selected things all at once. So for instance, if I wanted these objects to increase their bounciness under rigid body collision, so say I were to turn up their bounciness, that would actually only adjust the bounciness for the active object, which we can see down here in the outliner because its name is highlighted in orange, was this cube. So if I click it, only this object was affected when we changed this. So if we click on these other ones that we had selected when we changed that, you see they're the same. So that's kind of annoying, but there is a way to distribute all of your settings. Say you wanted to switch this back to convex hull collision detection, and say you wanted to turn its friction all the way down and its bounciness all the way up. So say you wanted now all of the rest of the cubes to behave like this one. For that, we can use this distribute settings button. So to use that, first select everything that we want to be changed. So we want all these cubes to be changed. Then we want to shift select the object with the settings that we want, or make sure that object is active. So if we come down here in our outliner and I scroll down, I can see that this cube here is active, the one we had selected. But if it wasn't, you would want to go ahead and shift select it, make sure it was selected and the active object. You can actually, if we hide its visibility, we can quickly see, yeah, okay, that's the one we want there. To distribute these surface response settings, as well as everything else that we could adjust here to the rest of these cubes, we just press distribute settings now, and now they will all behave like the settings we changed for the first one. And as you can see, they're sliding way crazier than the first time when we were press play on this animation. We can see them be much bouncier with each other, but they're not very bouncy once they hit the ground because the bounciness of the ground needs to be turned up as well. So if we press pause and go back, we could click on the ground here. We could turn its friction down to make the friction even lower and increase the bounciness, because all of these surface response settings, of course, it takes two to tango to work with these. So you're dealing with the object itself and then whatever object is going to touch that object. So both of these values, such as bounciness or friction, need to be similar if you want those things to work together. So now if we press play, we get huge bounciness, both with the cubes reflecting on each other and when they hit the ground. And of course, since we turn the friction way down, they're sliding really crazily. So we could just as easily turn the friction back up. We could turn the friction back up on the ground, and then select one of these cubes, turn its friction all the way up, then B to border select everything, and then just press distribute settings. Now if we click on any one of these, we'll see that their friction is all up too. So now if we press play, we still have massive bounciness, but notice how most of them are sticking to the surface rather than sliding all the way off.